about, as you see, embedding authentic bilingual provision in healthcare curricula. And it's a pleasure for me to welcome Gwyneth Richards and Gaynor Williams, who I've worked with for many years on this, and it's fantastic to see the developments, but they can give us the lowdown, as it were. They will be doing a presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer on a little panel here, and then I'll open it up to the floor, and please ask questions. Because we're capturing this on Panopto, I will have a roving mic, okay? I know it's not a large room, but for us to be able to capture all your fantastic questions, I will have a roving mic. So, hand up if you want to ask a question at the end. Nani, diolch yn fawr. Chi'n barod?
Thank you. So, I'm going to start by just pointing out there were 3 names on the list. Amwyn Davies, unfortunately, is unwell. So I'm covering her slides this morning. So we did put the presentation together, so hopefully I'll be able to cover what she was going to cover. So just to give you an overview of what we were asked to look at. So we originally submitted some work in as posters, and then we were asked to maybe deliver it as more of a session. So the 3 posters we originally put in covered the 3 areas we're going to look at today. So we'll just give you an overview of Welsh medium provision, really, and why the drivers are, why we are required to consider it as part of our delivery, if you like, and then look at bilingual education, then hone in particularly on healthcare and how we have managed to embed, not in all courses and not to a lesser and greater degree in some of our courses, but we will have a look at the healthcare courses, and then we're going to focus particularly on thinking particularly about the theme of this conference as authentic learning. We've looked then at placements and how we use placements as part of our courses and how we then use Welsh language within those placements. And then even more focusing in on one particular aspect, how we delivered that through the medium of Welsh within our course. And then we've got some student comments and evaluations at the end. So just to give you that context, you may or may well know this already. So the Welsh language is now it has confirmed official status within Wales, and that was it made in law in 2011. So English and Welsh need to be treated equally in public life, and we've had some education standards that you may well be aware of now. Schools are required any front-facing public involvement or student involvement that's not particularly related to academic studies should be offered bilingually as standard. And then to give you any more context, those of you who don't know, 20% of the population in Wales, those over 3, will speak Welsh. That was the census in 2011. And I include this map. This is when I show our students. So our students, so I'm a nurse academic, I'm an adult nurse by background, and I've come into the school in the last 5 years. So our nursing students will only go and see patients in South East Wales as part of their clinical placements, but all other allied health colleagues of the other courses we manage, they will see patients all over Wales. So we need to highlight the issue that actually there are Welsh speakers, and you will see, for example, the greatest concentration is in Cardiff of Welsh speakers, but of course we're in amongst another 80% of people who don't speak Welsh, whereas if you go to Sir Fôn, to Anglesey, 80-90% speak Welsh. I'm looking at my colleague Owen. But of course there's less people on the island, so proportionally it doesn't look as if there's as many, but actually they are. So it's about 11% of the population of Cardiff speak Welsh. But as I say, if you went to West Wales, where I'm from, 50%, Carnarvon 80%, and our students need to be aware of that when they are put in those placements. Okay, and then some of the influences, the things that drove us as a school to develop Welsh medium, or to develop the provision we have. There are Welsh government drivers. There's a document called Mwy na Geiriau, which I'll come on to in a minute, that really does focus on how we develop Welsh medium provision and how we support our patients. And if you think as healthcare educators, we are providing the workforce of the future, we need to make sure we're meeting the needs of our patients. We also have drivers in the form of HEFGU. The university are scrutinise on what the amount of Welsh language provision we have within higher education, and healthcare in Cardiff is seen as an area that can be developed. And on the back of that, Cardiff University have a fees and access and fees plan, which also highlights the importance of the Welsh language within our provision, the Welsh language standards, which I spoke about a little bit earlier, and then also the student voice. We should also always remember that our students have a choice as well. So as I said earlier, the Welsh Government back in 2012 published a document called More Than Just Words, Mwy na Geiriau, which is this framework that highlights the importance of how we support our patients through the medium of Welsh. So it's all based upon what we call an active offer. Patients shouldn't be required to ask us for services in Welsh. We should be offering them to them from the offset. And we need to instill that in our students so that when they then become part of the workforce, it's naturally part of something they do. And then a follow-on strategy in 2016 also then honed in on how do we make sure that Welsh is seen as normal within the health and social care environments. And I've just picked on Objective 5 here, which then looks at professional education, and there are expectations that we, or any bodies that deliver education to the workforce, should think about how Welsh language is embedded into the curriculums, their training programmes, etc. So there are lots of drivers. So then focusing more then on us as healthcare, what we've done, there's the University's Welsh Language Scheme 2014 that lists the expectations and those things that the university have committed to do. So we are cognizant of that scheme as part of what we do in healthcare. We also have a few lecturers. Myself, I came into post 6 years ago now to develop Welsh medium provision in adult nursing specifically. My lectureship has come to an end and I'm now part of their establishment. But we have Gwyneth, my colleague, who's in physiotherapy, and we've also got colleagues hopefully starting in children's nursing in the next few months. But there is commitment across the school. It's not just putting in some lectures and thinking that's it done. You have to think about the commitment of the whole school as well. Is this where I hand it over to you? So that was Anne when I couldn't remember where Anne finished, so I'll give you that.
So to sort of give an overview really of some of the things that we have to consider, because it's one thing to say that we're going to do this, but actually we have to think about the ground roots as well, and I'm relatively new to the school and bring perhaps a professional or a working background to the school as well. I work part-time, and I think one of the first things is that actually raising the awareness that in terms of the outward facing face that we have, it strikes me that maybe 18 months ago when I was looking about the job, that actually there was this almost felt like a token gesture of, yeah, we do Welsh as well. And actually it's how we make that real, and how people that are looking at Cardiff University's courses are actually seeing that it is real and not something that you press the button on the top right-hand side to have a translation. So there's an element of needing to raise awareness, and that comes with things like working with open days, and actually part of my role also is going out to do roadshows, careers events in some areas to try and promote those people that are actually thinking about careers to actually realise that there is Welshness within a career. Certainly in physiotherapy, up until this year we were the only provider of physiotherapy education in Wales. That's changed slightly in terms of now there is a small cohort of people in Glyndŵr. But physiotherapy is a very competitive profession, and so when also the Russell Group University, the reality is that we are drawing on massive number of students in physiotherapy. I think the pattern in nursing is slightly different because you tend to draw from more of the area, although interestingly actually in the new nurses coming in, there seems to be a change in that trend in some ways. But certainly it is a very competitive environment to be in, and actually there's an element of lack of confidence possibly that actually being Welsh is important, and speaking Welsh is important, and that's something that maybe we can allay some of those fears before they even start at open day. There's that need to ensure that people are aware of the opportunity. So our role is many-fold in terms of not just delivering teaching. We support in terms of marketing. We're trying to raise that profile, and actually what's really nice, and I've seen a big change in the last 18 months, is actually marketing are coming to us saying, we've got this in English, can we now have it in Welsh, because we need, so that it's that stone in the pool, and I really do feel that the ripples are going further, and I certainly feel within my physiotherapy profession that my worry was I was going to be a nuisance, but actually it doesn't feel that way. It feels that it's nice to, most people feel there's a go-to person, and actually there's that critical mass, because there's not just me, there's Gary, there's Sian, there's actually Alison and Dysgu Cymraeg, and I've got Natalie, my colleague, who job shares. So actually there's an element now of normalising this, and I think this is really important. It is normal to be thinking about authenticity within authentic learning. I think we've covered most of that. I mean, the main thing is to influence people's decision to choose Cardiff. So we'll go the other way. So in terms of groundwork, so my bit of the talk is about placements. Placements are authentic in their own right. They are putting people in a workplace. Physiotherapy students don't get exposure to placements until their second year. So their first year is very, very heavily loaded with the skills and the academic background, which I think is, and interestingly with the talks about assessment this morning and how we look at that, there are changes afoot in many ways. Placements are going to be placements. So for physiotherapy, it's 4 weeks in a placement. But what we've tried to do is, again, normalise that. And having myself in the role, we've been able to map where the clinical educators are. And there are over 50 Welsh-speaking clinical educators in the, I'm guessing between 250, 300 clinical educators that we have in Wales as a whole. So actually there's a working database that we can tap into. People change, rotations, band 5s, band 6 rotations, so it's a live document. Interestingly, and I think this was the same as me when I applied for the job, is why me, why not you? Clinical educators are actually quite, they're put in a bit of a comfort zone issue with actually, oh, I've got a Welsh speaking student, my Welsh isn't good enough. How much do I have to do in Welsh? Is it written Welsh? It's again about normalising, and Gaynor and I are sticklers for this is real world stuff. Cardiff is a tertiary centre. We've got to remember that there are going to be Welsh-speaking people from mid-Wales that have to come to Cardiff for specialist surgery, emergency surgery. They are going to be Welsh speakers. They might be in high dependency. Those people strongly value the opportunity and the active offer thing in Welsh. So I think it's realising that these things are important for patients, but actually staff and students, on the whole, are probably not putting their heads above the parapet to say how important it is. And I think it's again that critical mass of valuing the Welsh language in that authenticity. And again, it's about informing stakeholders, and it's about normalising. Lots of the things we do, I think, we're involved through the Coleg Cymraeg with colleagues in North Wales, and about sharing information. And one of the things that we would like to do is to have resources much easier available, so you're not looking for them everywhere. It would be really nice to have a central resource, and that's something that we'd like to work on. Translation services, we depend on translation services. We're not translating all the stuff that goes on our modules, but we also use translation services. We're really, really fortunate. Last year we had students, Welsh-speaking students, present to a small group using translation services. So they presented in Welsh, and we had the translation team doing cyfieithu ar y pryd, live translation.
So like this morning?
Like this morning, yeah.
So Robin came in and did the assessment, so they would...
And I know that medics have...
To each, to colleagues, to peers, in Welsh, with Robin doing live translation. Because
the other alternative is they present twice. Which, And I know that medics have done that as well, and when haven't they, in terms of how to make these things real life work, because that again is authentic. You go to council meetings, there will be simultaneous translation. So I think it's again, you know, that was probably the first time that a lot of those students had been exposed to simultaneous translation, and again it's normalising those things. And I think the other thing is it's okay to be a Welsh speaker to ask for that service. My daughter works in the YFC, and she was one of the first people to actually ask at All Wales level, can I do this talk in Welsh because it's easier for me? And lo and behold, translation services arrived. So you have to be prepared, and I think it's about putting your head above the parapet sometimes and saying, this is what I need to do, because actually I'm happier presenting in Welsh. So that's the groundwork. So what we've done is as best we can, to ensure Welsh-speaking personal tutors. So myself and Gaynor are looking through next year's cohort in order to identify the Welsh speakers and to try and make sure that we have personal tutors that they can go to. And we're able to do that in physiotherapy, midwifery, nursing, adult nursing at the moment, and also some of the RADS students can have a personal tutor. So that's quite a high proportion of the people. And we're talking small numbers.
You might be familiar that the university now will ask all students at enrolment if they want to actually become a tutor. So that information comes to you electronically, or the school will know about that. But we take that slightly further in that if we identify any Welsh-speaking students, which they also do at enrolment, we automatically put them with Welsh-speaking lecturers. So even if they haven't asked for a Welsh-speaking tutor, they are placed with them automatically. So, because what we find is a lot of students don't actually think about it. It's not high on their list when they come to university. They're worried about halls and they're worried about freshers or whatever. So we've just put that in, and we've found nobody's
complained.
Welsh-speaking lecturers. We haven't had anybody say, I don't want that.
No.
They're all relatively happy with that.
I've come across someone who actively did not put forward they wanted a Welsh-speaking tutor because he felt that he should be able to cope.
Yep.
He felt that he was being a nuisance.
Yep.
And he felt that he might be seen as someone who was needy rather than someone who can speak their own language naturally and feel more comfortable. He didn't see it that way.
No.
When a lot of young people don't.
No. No, exactly. I think that sums it up, Alison, and thank you for that. Because it is that thing about, we did some focus group work last year. Welsh speakers don't want to be different. They don't. The other thing they were really about, if I say I speak Welsh, will I get put in a placement in the remotest part of Wales that nobody else wants to go to? You know, these are the real things that they worry about. So assessments and exams in Welsh, we've got some way to go with that, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to choose to be able to do their assessments in Welsh. What we don't want to do is to have their exam papers translated and then marked by somebody who's, you know, reading them as an English paper, because for various reasons that really doesn't work. So that's why at least myself, Gaynor, we can actually mark in Welsh. There are other works to do around that in terms of things like when papers need to be moderated, but it's a learning curve, and actually I think networking, communicating solves most of the problems.
I would say to add to that, but if the QAA are supposed to be publishing work on how to assess in Welsh. We're waiting for it since last August, and it's been quite, but there will be some.
Because it is very different, you translate. I think it's very, you know, if you had somebody rewrite your essay, they wouldn't necessarily, in English, they wouldn't necessarily write it the way that you've written it. And so certainly there's a lot lost in translation. I know that other institutions have in the past asked, in different subjects, have asked for, you know, people to submit their paper a day earlier, and then, you know, whoop, not here. And so that it can be translated and they can have it back to read it to make sure that it reads okay. Now those are things that if you didn't know about it, you wouldn't realise it. So by being able to mark in Welsh papers, it hopefully takes away those worries that students have.
Can I add something from a historical perspective in School of Healthcare Sciences? I remember marking papers and assignments from Welsh-speaking students who were writing in English, and they were at a terrible disadvantage doing their projects, doing their assignments, because English wasn't their natural So having this Welsh education provision, I think, is really good because it takes away that disadvantage, and I think that makes it much fairer.
Yeah, there are two issues there, aren't there? You need to upskill their English language standards, obviously. For some papers, it has to happen that they are marked in English for some papers, but it's again giving... Sorry, Alan, oedd rhywbeth o ti am weid yn wahanol?
Yeah, well, no, we've just looked at our students. The English standard is
Yeah,
the problem.
I was... No.
The English skills isn't.
I think there can be isolated people that have problems, but sometimes you wonder, would they have problems within the English language? I think you have to be careful about that smoke screen. But I think if you've got good personal tutors, then you can allay some of that and nip that in the bud, really.
What you
I think
is when they write in Welsh, they're just as bad.
exactly. So that, yeah, that's right. So it's knowing really which it is.
So that's my perception.
Yeah, and that's right, and it is a perception. Yeah, but actually there's a lot of evidence to say if you're bilingual, then actually there is... You perform better on the whole. So in terms of student support, there are student support in Welsh and English, and obviously we do encourage people to learn Welsh if they want to learn Welsh, and at our induction days we talk to them. So going on a little bit more then to placement, sorry, we're going on time. A high percentage of the educational provision at healthcare is placement. This is what people are taught to do. This is what they want to do when they sign up for their physio degree, their nursing degree, their radiography. So nursing carries probably the highest percentage in terms of clinical hours. Physiotherapy is governed by the HCPC and the CSP guidance in terms of hours that we have to provide. Ours are currently 8 placements of 4 weeks. Nursing is very different. Their placements are
50% of our
and
placement.
Timing-wise of placements, they're out for...
8 weeks. They'd be out 20 weeks of the year on placement, so we only see them for half of their time at university.
Yeah, but essentially, communication, collaboration, organisation, and review are the big things. Yeah, the other way. Sorry. So the infrastructure, really. So I think we've covered most of what placements are like in terms of supporting clinical educators, making them feel confident that they can take Welsh-speaking students. Beforehand, in terms of, for those of you that perhaps are less familiar with placements generally, there's a lot of work done beforehand, before students go in there in the first place. Educational audits, health and safety, risk assessments, and getting to know the clinical educators, make sure that they're competent, clinical educator training, so that they are aware of the assessment processes. So there's a lot of work that's done in the background, albeit for any placement, let alone the Welsh. So the Welsh is no different in that sense. We don't do anything different. It's about normalising it. And I think then they have, the students have a portfolio. The physiotherapy ones tend to complete them in English. The nursing ones can choose to do them Welsh. The physios could do them in Welsh, but we're new to the game. And I think the end of my bit is just to say that if anybody does have any Welsh-speaking people, or they want to use that slide in terms of mindset, then please feel free to poach it.
Okay. So that's placements. So I just wanted to focus now on what we do. So before our students, student nurses, nursing students, they join us in September, and by December they'll be out on their first placement. So they'll be out looking after patients for 8 weeks from December. So we need to make sure that they have fundamental skills before we send them out into the workplace. So and I think the thing we need to remember about healthcare courses is they're all compulsory. There are no modules that people can choose. So any provision we developed within our courses had to be what was already being delivered in English. So we can't just do something else. It has to match what our students are doing. So we are slightly restricted in what we can deliver. But the beauty of it is that we know it works, and it's a course that is run. So for example, when we looked at how we prepare students for their first initial placement, one of the aspects we will upskill them on or develop skills in is what we call fundamental care. Anybody want to hazard, those who don't work in healthcare, what would you think fundamental care covers? Any guesses? we don't use that term here because it's never basic, but it's helping somebody eat, helping somebody maintain their hygiene, helping somebody meet their elimination needs. They are fundamental to us as humans, so they're the fundamental needs. So as students, this is what they're expected. They have competencies they have to meet clinically. So our students are assessed. We talked a bit about assessment this morning, an authentic assessment. So it's the clinicians that are assessing our students, not us. We rely on our clinical partners to assess. So there's 80 competencies in year one that have to be met, and they are judged by qualified nursing staff in all of those areas I showed you on the map. So fundamental care is one. So we recognise that we can't just throw people out there and say get on with it. We have to preload them a little bit. So we chose this element because what we do find is language attrition is a big problem, in that if you're an L1, I'm looking at Leon now, the L1 is first language Welsh speakers, isn't it? I don't know, what's the L? IC, is it, or L1, what does the L stand for?
Yeah.
First language. So your first language, L1. So if I myself, I was brought up in a Welsh speaking home. I don't need to speak Welsh every day for me to remember it. It comes very naturally for me to speak Welsh. But if you're an L2 person, then you probably come from an English speaking or a non-Welsh speaking background and have gone to school and have developed your Welsh language skills through education. But then, of course, if you're not exposed to it regularly, then you lose those skills. The attrition rate is very high. So we found, and of course, if you take the highest proportion, I think 20% of children now are educated through the medium of Welsh in Wales. So they will be coming to us at university. They will be coming to us, but if we don't normalise Welsh language use very early on, then they will lose those skills. So we identified that we wanted to get Welsh language skills into the curriculum very early on, and this was a good way of doing it. So fundamental care, it helps them transition. I think it's trying to make sure they don't see language as an education thing, but that it's a life thing, it's a life skill, something you need to use on a regular basis, and it's to help them develop competence in that language. So when we teach fundamental skills, it's a four-pronged, we do it in 4 ways then. So we start off with blended learning. We've got a blended learning approach. We will use e-learning. So we've developed quite a few e-learning modules that are bilingual. Well, they're Welsh and English. So we've worked closely with our learning technology. We've got 2 learning technicians within the school, but it is very heavy work for us as Welsh speakers because they don't speak Welsh. They're really supportive, but they don't speak Welsh. So if we give them text in Welsh, they don't know what that means and which side it needs to go on to. So lots of editing by ourselves to get these up and running. So they're done in Xerti. If you're familiar with Xerti, that's not, that can be a bit clunky sometimes. The films, funny enough, I reviewed these, so we developed these 3 years ago, and we just rolled them over onto Learning Central. So hand on heart, I haven't checked them for a year. So I checked them to develop this. So on the film within it doesn't work anymore. So I'm going to go back and have a look why Xerti's moved. But there's a big, there's a 20-minute film in there that is voiceover in Welsh. We filmed it in English. We filmed it without any words, and then we put English over the top and Welsh over the top, which makes it only one lot of filming, but you can voice over it in different. So things to think about if you're developing e-learning. And then all the text, etc. And then this shot at the bottom just shows you where it sits on Learning Central. So we've, I don't know well you can see that, but they're actually labelled bilingually. So they haven't got to go to a separate page to find the Welsh ones. So there's assisting with eating and drinking, and also you're going to put that event, they can click on either one. So they haven't got to go to a different area on Learning Central to find them. And they get certificates at the end. So we need the certificates to demonstrate they've done the e-learning before they attend the session. But they're in Welsh and English, those certificates. And then before we send them out into practice, we luckily enough in the School of Healthcare, we've got lots of mock areas, mock wards if you like. So we've got, we call it the Cullinan Suite for historical reasons. But they are set up, if anybody's ever been to the Heath Hospital as an inpatient or to visit, you will know there are 4 bedders in those wards. Well, our Cullinan Suite is set up like those 4 bedders, so they reflect what students will see in practice. And they get a chance to wash a dummy, they get a chance to feed each other, they get a chance to brush each other's teeth, they get a chance to check each other's pulse, their blood pressure, etc., etc. So it's developing their communication skills, it's developing their just readiness to touch somebody else that they've never met before and do some relatively intimate things with them very quickly. But these sessions are delivered in Welsh. There's enough of us as a capacity to be able to do this. So the sessions are run with 16 students at a time and 2 lecturers. Each session is about 3 hours. So we have 250 students that go through these workshops before we get them out into practice. So you can imagine it's quite a frantic week when we're doing it. So, okay. And then placements. So once we've done that element of preparing them for fundamental care, we then send them into placement, and in their first placement, fundamental care is what they're expected, the competency they're most expected to have to meet. So as Gwyneth said, we will identify mentors, we call them in nursing, they're clinical educators in our allied health courses, and these are Welsh-speaking staff who are prepared to support our students with the medium of Welsh. And it doesn't seem like great shakes, but if it happened before, it happened by luck that these people came together. Now we plan it and we make it much more. So we find the people that speak Welsh, go and find them, ask them if they're happy to support them, and if so, this is what they're expected to do, and it works really well. Keeping tabs on them is hard because these people go and have maternity leave, or they go off, or they move somewhere else, so we're like detectives trying to find them. But what we found is that the staff, their confidence has grown. They've never needed to use their Welsh clinically, so their confidence has grown on the back of what we've done with them as well. So, and that can only impact on patient care really. And then finally we have as part of the module, so the clinical element does sit within a module, and to assess that module we have the portfolio. This is a big document the students carry with them everywhere they go, signed off by their mentors and signed off by the student themselves. And on top of that, we expect them to do a 2,000-word reflective account on a aspect of fundamental care that they've had to deliver in their first year. And that, again, is done through the medium of Welsh. It's written first, as a reflective account, first person, so they find it relatively easy to write. And it's a good way to get them, again, to normalise using their Welsh language within the healthcare system. Student voice. We did a focus group of students a couple of months ago now, because when we mapped the course out, of course it's a bit up in the air, what do you think the students would want and what do you think is easy to do, etc. But then we went back to our students, having done this for 3 years, to ask them what they felt about it. And you can read these yourself, but the majority of them found it positive. They wanted the academic, they weren't that keen on the academic writing in Welsh, but they enjoyed the reflective accounts. They found that far easier to do that in Welsh. Clinical placements, interestingly, we thought people would choose the area, so we send them all over the place, and we thought they'd choose the area over the Welsh person, the mentor, but they far rather have a Welsh-speaking mentor, but not look after particularly a Welsh-speaking group of patients. It's the mentor, it's that relationship they have with the mentor is important to them. Lots of them did their presentations in Welsh, and we do OSCE examinations, which are like real-world examinations. They prefer to do those in Welsh if they can. So we're quite pleased, because what we have put, where we've concentrated our efforts, seems to be where students like it as well. So we're hopefully going in the right direction. We need to do some work on common terminology. That's one thing of the project that we need to develop a bit more. And then finally, just some, these are in Cymraeg, but you could probably work that one out, the bottom one. Profiad positif iawn, a very positive experience. It was great being able to, it was nice to be able to discuss certain situations personal to me in my mother tongue. It was nice to be able to speak with my personal tutor and my mentor on clinical placement in Welsh. It was good that we could bring Welsh-speaking students together to develop their clinical competence. And students also recognised how important it was for patients, and I think that's ultimately where we wanted to go, is to impact upon patient care. Okay. Have we got time to play this short film? Where are we on time?
Yes, we...
It's 3 minutes. I don't think it's even 3 minutes. No.
Yes, go on.
So this was
So blwyddyn yma dwi'n cael cyfle i wneud ysgoloriaeth efo'r Coleg Cymraeg, lle dwi'n gwneud hyn o credit y cwrs yn Gymraeg. a di cael pres ar gyfer o hefyd, so mae'n gyfle gret i wneud rhywun traethodau'n Gymraeg a lleoliadau'n Gymraeg hefyd, so fydd yn cael ei cyflwyniadau'n Gymraeg a cyfathrebu efo'r cleifion, so mae hynna'n roed lot o hyder iddo fi yn mewn i'n lleoliad cyntaf.
Fi wedi gweld defnyddio'r iaith Gymraeg yn really bwysig, yn enwedig pan chi'n gweld cleifion. Fi'n teimlo'n lot mwy hyderus yn siarad trwy'r Cymraeg a mae'r cleifion yn teimlo'n lot mwy cartrefol pan chi'n siarad trwy'r Cymraeg fyd. So yeah, mae'n really bwysig.
How was that shot? So we did a conference. Oh. And there we are. There's our contact details if you need us. I mean, we're not saying we know all the answers, but we're happy to share what we've done to date and we continue. So the slight problem for us is at the moment all our courses have been revalidated in the next year. So everything we've put in place, we now need to look again and hopefully we'll be able to develop a provision again in our new courses. Okay.
Wel, diolch yn fawr. We've got a good 10 minutes now for questions and answers, hopefully. So, that was, I really enjoyed that, and what became clear was, I will have to use this for the panopto, won't I? How does this work? Hello? So it's more than just looking at the education, it's language planning as well, isn't it? And you mentioned a bit about that. But are you able to give us an understanding of the time, required to develop this provision? Maybe that is a question to you first.
Okay, so I've been in post for 6 years now, and I would say when I first started the first year, I spent not doing very much teaching. It was much more about mapping the course to identify where the need was and what we could. And I think it's important that whatever we did was sustainable, that it was deliverable. So there's no point doing something and then finding we can't do it next year or the year after the year after. We have to be very aware of CMA regulations, so we can't offer something that in an open day that we cannot then meet in 2 or 3 years' time. So that's taken time. So I would say it's probably taken us 3 or 4 years. We now are able to offer a third of our course with the medium of Welsh. But it's ongoing. You think you've got it and then something changes and then lecturers leave or we didn't talk too much about, but we do recognise we need a critical mass of students as well. For it to be able to work, if we do skills groups of 8, we need to have at least 8 students for it to be doable. So this year we've just looked, so when I first started we had 4 Welsh speakers in our cohort of 160 students in adult nursing, and this year we have 30. So I don't know if we can take all of that, but we've definitely got bigger numbers coming through. We've seen that in midwifery, children's nursing, radiography, physio, your numbers, year on year they are growing. So we're going to take some of that. But it could also be that Cardiff University particularly raised the profile of Welsh medium education as well and trying to draw those Welsh-speaking students. Medicine, for example, have had great success, haven't you? So a lot of the work, you have to think long-term. So, and sometimes it's hard to justify why we need to do all the open days, why we need to go to Newcastle Emlyn to do a health board meeting with year 9 students, but we need to get them that early to recognise that they need to so it's the same as the student we did the Pecha Kucha session earlier where they were talking about modern language attrition and how do you draw, you have to get people in very early to identify that the use of language. Did you want to add anything to that? No? Diolch.
Lovely, I think we've got a question over there.
Again, I'm Mike, and I'm from the School of Healthcare Sciences, as some people know. I enjoy going into meetings and saying the future is clearly Welsh. And the policy direction in the country is that has been for a while. And I think it's great what is happening, seeing that sort of come to fruition a bit. Along the way, until we get to that imagined future, we've been doing some work, haven't we? In terms of the portfolio actually, and trying to get a really good solution for that in terms of how that could be done bilingually. Because some of the issues that you get with bilingualism really come home to roost when you have to put them into a database, for example, and then the question is which bit actually was the authentic bit that the student meant and got stored and marked and things like that. So we're going to probably end up with 2 versions of the same database, which creates all kinds of havoc. So there's actually a long-term problem there until we actually switch to a situation. No. Okay, so there's a problem, and I think that we had a really nice solution presented to us, but and the other thing that you get then, and getting to my point, is that there are a couple of places where you'll go where people will not get that policy vision, basically, and they will basically smile nicely and say, yes, well, I'm sure we'll get there one day, but they won't be instrumental in making that happen, and in fact will choose the least worst option rather than necessarily the most positive option. I think we'll get them eventually. They don't have any choice because that's the policy direction, but I think that the vision for that is not universally shared, and I don't know how you move that forward apart from what you're already doing, really. There's some blurb.
Diolch. Many hands up here. Who's first?
Diolch yn fawr iawn. My question is based about personal tutors. You mentioned some of the programmes have Welsh language tutors, but I'm wondering how we as an institution, and this is cross college and university, how we deal with those students who want a Welsh language speaking tutor, and yet there aren't any tutors on that programme or in that school. How do you get over that issue in healthcare sciences?
I can tell you that, well, just yesterday we've got a student who's studying ODP, Occupational Department Practice. There are no Welsh speakers within that team. So I am going to be that student's pastoral tutor, because the university's guidance is for personal tutor, but the pastoral role only. So I am going to be personal tutor number 2. Personal tutor number 1 will be an ODP, because we are to be on the register as a healthcare professional, you need to have been assessed by a person with the same background as you, same clinical background. So they have to have an ODP as an academic tutor, and I'm going to be their pastoral tutor. So it's relatively new, so we're going to see how it goes, but that's the methodology we're going to follow. Yeah.
Can I ask a supplementary? Say, for example, you've got a large school, 300 students per year, perhaps 3 or 4 years, and you have 2 Welsh speakers within that school. How can we then deliver against Welsh language standards? I guess is what I'm asking.
I think the university needs to think about its HR, and if there is a big push to get Welsh-speaking tutors, then that needs to be part of how we recruit staff. I don't know if you...
I entirely agree. I'm Owen, I'm from the School of Medicine, and we've got lots of helpful doctors who are willing to be involved in education, but because they're not on the staff of the university, they can't be personal tutors, although they'd be perfect as career or pastoral tutors. And I think, like you say, we've got to think about how we recruit that type of personal tutor, I think.
Hi, I'm Shakila from School of Healthcare, from Physio. Proud to be here because our colleague has presented really good work to be going forward, because this aligns with my presentation with the Advanced HE conference early this year. I presented on a content integrated language skills development as an inclusive curriculum for postgraduate students, because Cardiff University is one of the major universities in Wales, attracting international cohort. And I looked into research background about bilingualism, where Wales, France, Netherlands are all bilingual countries, and Spain as well. And looking into the deeper research, there's only so far from 1990 onwards, there's 2 studies widely, worldwide published on using bilingualism in the curriculum. And the Netherlands and France has integrated in the business school postgraduate using an online, as the technology is growing, they have used an online technology using a content integrated model, okay? And in Spain, Valencia, and I couldn't remember her second name, and she's a PhD graduate, and she's published a lot of work around bilingualism. On my research, I got in contact with Anna, and I'm in the process of getting forward with this project. If I'd have the opportunity to present today, I would have been able to talk more about it, but it is all in the Advanced HE portal. Whoever is a member of Advanced HE, you can see my project there. So I take this opportunity as to advertise my project as well. Okay, so because I need the support from Cardiff University to get this rolling on, because I feel bilingualism, making one to think in their own language, develops their skills, especially the critical skills. Okay, so which is a major skill where the employer 2020 is looking out for. We have to produce the critical thinkers out there in the market to enhance our healthcare provision, and because of the widely changing nature of healthcare. So going deep into this one, I think this model can be adapted to the undergraduate for Welsh medium as well, because as a personal tutor, I don't know whether there is a point system being advocated for the reflective essay system, what you just exhibited here. So they can actually, this software actually can be modeled into their own language. What are the bilingual language for Welsh and English, or Spanish or English, whatever it is. And it is remotely examining as an assessment network set up inside that. Remotely, the advocator, the manager who is designing the curriculum, can assess the student process. And so it's one way of tool where we can actually pilot it around with the personal tutors, assessing the skills and developing some, as we have the privilege of having the Welsh speakers as tutors here. So you can actually look into designing some questions related to the Welsh and advocating through the software. And after the session, I can talk more in detail. I don't want to take the time. Okay, fine.
What a fantastic way to finish the session, I'm afraid. I know there's a lot of questions here, but are you hanging around?
Sorry.
Wonderful. I have to draw it to an end, I'm afraid, but fantastic. Diolch yn fawr iawn.